All right.
Hi, Shag.
Hey, America. Hey,
Yeah,
world.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, planet. So I'm going to do a little introduction, though, with this, just to kind of give an introduction to UnitedNColor. And this is a movement of peace that connects people through artistic expression and creativity. Through the lure of design and artistic passion, we seek to inspire positive and impactful conversations focused on the themes of love, intelligence, creativity, and innovation in an effort to promote awareness and unite humankind. And so the couch is always open and available. So let's have a seat and color the future together. Today, we're here. Our guest is Shag on the couch, on the hot spot.
Comfy couch.
Comfy couch, how
I
is
have one of these in my house in Palm Springs.
it? The same
Not this
one?
color.
Not the Man Steve's version? So Shag, a renowned artist, known literally the world over, and on artsy.net, you're described as an artist whose slick narrative kitsch paintings recall early 1960s advertising illustration, bossa nova album cover art, and Disney animation. Your paintings depict an ominous world of stylized, witty urbanites, and your paintings have spawned a book, an album, a film, and a musical. You've been commissioned to paint 13 illustrations to commemorate the 40th anniversary of Disneyland's Haunted Mansion. You've got paintings on all 7 continents, and your paintings might sell in the amounts of tens of thousands of dollars. You have retail stores and contracts with some of the biggest brands in the world. I could probably go on, but give us some insights into your creative journey. What has it been like, getting to this point now?
I worked for almost 10 years as a commercial illustrator and graphic designer in the record industry.
Okay.
And was working on my own art on the side. And it really surprised me when the art I was doing on the side took off, and eclipsed my career as a commercial artist.
People liked it. You found out that people liked it.
Yeah.
Did you know, when did art first grab hold of you? Do you remember that moment?
I've been drawing ever since I can remember.
Yeah.
So some of my earliest memories are drawing pictures. And I was always like that kid in the class who was the best artist in the class. Or when I got to high school, I was the second best artist in my high school.
Do you remember the second best?
Yeah.
Who was the first?
This kid named Chris Young, who, I Googled him a few years ago to see what he was doing, and he wasn't making a living as an artist.
All right.
So.
I was going to say, I hope it was either somebody big or not. But what were your earliest subjects? I mean, what were you drawing at the time? Do you remember?
My earliest subjects as a kid were like war scenes, airplanes dropping bombs. I think a lot of boys, that's what they draw.
Why do you think that is? What's with the violence in the battle that we are drawn to?
Maybe it's a male thing,
Jeez. And how about just your earliest memories of just being creative? I mean, did you grow up in a creative household? Were your parents creative? What was your source of inspiration?
My grandfather was a commercial artist,
Okay.
a successful commercial artist. So there was always in my house, there was the knowledge that art was a legitimate career path, if that's what you wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
And my mother had studied art. She'd minored in art at UCLA, so she was artistic, and it was just assumed that her kids were going to be artistic. And for the most part, they were.
Yeah, but I read that your father was an accountant, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it skipped a generation.
no artistic. On his side of the family, not a lot of art vision.
Yeah. And then, so were you always expressing your creativity? And I wonder too, do you think there's a difference between creativity, being creative, and expressing that that creativeness?
Yeah, because you could be really creative if somebody hired you to do a logo for chocolate milk or something.
Sure.
And it's not really your expression. It's the company's expression, but you're using your own creativity to manipulate their expression.
Perfect.
So to me, that's the difference.
Yeah. And then do you remember the moment then that you felt confident enough to start expressing your own creativity?
I don't know if there was a single moment. The very first Shag paintings I did, I was pretty convinced no one was going to buy them, so I was going to end up keeping them myself, and so I was confident that I liked what I was doing.
Yeah.
I didn't know if other people would like it.
And is this one of your earlier
That's a very
paintings, right?
early painting. That was done when I lived in an apartment after I had first gotten married, and we had bright green carpeting. We needed something on the wall over the living room sofa, so I painted that.
Does this one have a title?
It's called Rarotonga Cubism.
Nice. And where does the love of tiki come from?
Well, I spent the first 8 years of my life in Hawaii,
Okay.
so I think subconsciously that whole sort of tropical Polynesian vibe made a big influence on me.
Yeah.
When I started doing art years later after I'd moved back to the mainland, I think that, the first 8 years of my life had a big impact on that.
Yeah. Do you go back to Hawaii often?
Every now and then.
Yeah.
Used to go every year for vacation.
Yeah.
But haven't been going.
So I always like to ask, knowing that you grew up in Hawaii and then moved to California, but what were you like as a kid? Did you represent, was there a trace of who you are now as you were a kid?
I don't think so. I think I was just a average kid. I didn't, aside from being a good drawer artist, I didn't excel in many other things. I was a good student.
Okay. Sports?
No,
No?
not really into sports.
Clubs?
Clubs? No, not really into clubs.
TV?
Yeah, every kid watched TV.
Exactly. What I realized though, from kind of doing my research, but you were not always, like you said, on the path to be an artist though, necessarily, right?
Right.
Even though you knew you were creative, had a creative bone, but you kind of thought maybe you were going to do something else with your life.
Yeah, and I think in high school I thought I wanted to be an architect, studied business for a couple of years, and then realized, what I really want to do is art.
Yeah. So did you have a click moment? Because I changed my major a couple times too, or at least one time, but I remember that click moment where I'm like, I got to get out of here.
I did. I was sitting in a business class, and before the class started, this group came in and they said, we're here to talk about the accounting student softball league. And I remember thinking, like, who would want to play softball with a bunch of accounting students? They're the most boring. And I was like, wait, I'm one of those.
Right?
So I'm like, nah, these people are not my people.
I got to get out.
And so I switched over to art.
How funny. I read that a shag painting often takes place in the middle of a story whose conclusion could be hilarious, catastrophic, or both, creating a world of endless hinted narratives. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I never want to give it all away in the painting and say what happened before and what's happening later. It's a technique I used even early on to try and engage people when they were looking at the painting, to try and pull them into the story. So they say, what happened? Why is this happening? What's already happened and what's going to happen after this?
Yeah. And do you get, do you ever get thoughts of people that are just, it's way off? I'm sure everybody has their interpretation, right?
A lot of people interpret things and I'm like, I didn't think that's what was going on in this painting. Sometimes I'm like, that's even better than what I was thinking,
Retitle that one.
Yeah.
How about your early ties to the 60s and advertising culture and kind of, I've heard you say, wishing what life were like. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think my love of the 60s, late 50s, early 60s came out of the kind of music I liked. I was collecting old records. I like early 60s garage music, surf instrumentals, soundtracks from that era. And I used to collect those. And then you'd see the old magazines at the thrift store, the flea market, and I started picking those up, and they were kind of like an entree into this visual world that was completely different than the way things looked in the 1980s.
Yeah.
This is the mid 80s, late 80s, and from that I got into the architecture of that era and the furniture of that era. And when I started doing my own paintings, that's what I wanted to paint. The early paintings were aspirational. I was painting things I wanted, but couldn't afford. Like a place I wanted to live, or a room I wanted to be in, or a party I wanted to be at. So in that sense, the paintings are still aspirational for a lot of people. They depict this world that a lot of people wish they could be in.
Well, and that's a great word, and I've got that in my notes here too, just that idea of aspiration, and you create these environments that seem so perfect and so polished and so desirable. Is there anything sort of lying underneath that?
And a lot of the paintings, if you look, there's a dark undercurrent. Like something bad is happening maybe out the window. Could be a party in this beautiful mid-century modern house overlooking the city, but then if you look closely, something really bad's happening. Or it could be a TV's on in a room in my painting, and if you look on the TV, something really is bad happening out in the outside world, not in this world where the party is happening.
Over the years, have any of your paintings, do they sort of reflect your personal experiences maybe? Ever, social commentary or political
there's
stance?
a lot of, especially later as I began to see more success in an artist and had more social situations, cocktail parties and things, a lot of the work was reflective of that, what was actually happening in my life and around me. I don't really consider myself a political artist per se. There's an undercurrent of my worldview, politically and socially in the paintings, but it's not overt. It's not in your face.
But I think there's a beauty to that though, because I do think, and that was my next question, is why do you think that art is so important as a vehicle for social commentary? Because I do think there is some sort of social commentary in your art.
Because art can convey emotions, not just painting, music or film or TV, can convey emotions that the printed word can't, or that a speech can't. And it can convey an idea, that old cliche, a picture's worth 1,000 words. It can convey this idea quickly and emotionally and targeted in a way that like an essay can't.
Yeah, and it can really hit you like a hammer, And how about music? So, one of my questions was, will you guys be back on tour soon? When will the Swamp Zombies, kind of do a reunion tour?
Never.
Yeah. The music has been a big part of your life, right?
I was in a lot of bands. Some of the other bands, one of the other bands I was in has reunited a couple times too.
What was that one?
It's called the Huntington Cads, and it was kind of early 60s British style instrumental music. So a little bit like surf music, but a British take on that. And we reunited this past summer to play a festival in Italy. It reminded me again of why I'd quit bands.
Give us a little insight into that.
Well, partly as an artist, I'm the boss of it all.
Right.
I'm the one who says what a picture looks like. In a band, you're a democracy or sometimes a benign dictatorship. There's one person in the band who controls things. And this band actually was sort of a benign dictatorship. I wasn't the dictator, which is one of the reasons I was willing to reunite. I don't have to expend a lot of creative energy in this band. But it's so time consuming.
Takes a lot of work.
Rehearsals, practices. You got to get to the venue at 2 p.m. to do a sound check and then hang around the rest of the day. Then you go on at midnight and you play till 1 or whatever, and then you hang around until 3 a.m. and
then hit the repeat button, do it again. And it seems like when you throw yourself into something, you really throw yourself all in. I've heard and I've read, how much you work, how much you're painting. So I would imagine you sort of choose a path and go down it pretty deep.
But it's got to be something I'm really into.
Yeah.
It's hard to throw yourself all into a project that your heart's not into.
Right.
Like I've taken a couple things. I hate to admit it, just for the money. I was offered a big paycheck to do something, and I won't do something if it's completely against what I do or it doesn't fit into my world. But there have been things where I didn't feel like my heart was completely in it, and it's hard to take time to do those things.
Yeah.
It's hard to get that excitement to say, hey, I was so into this, I painted till 3 a.m.
Yeah, regardless of how big the paycheck is. Huh?
Yeah.
So for me, ever since I caught wind of your art, which was years ago, and I've yet to acquire a piece, so maybe someday. But I enjoy your works for the element of escapism. So I think there's this, you can just kind of stare at it for a while, and we talked about just sort of that desirable and attaining. But there's also consumerism and consumption are topics in there. And so is that a celebration or a condemnation?
It's both, like I was talking about the early paintings that were aspirational. I was painting things I wanted. I want that couch. I want that chair. I want that, that piece of art. I want that house. And then as my career progressed and I was able to attain a lot of those things I had painted, I still painted them because I thought they were cool things. And then at some point I realized they're almost meaningless, They're just like set decorations for your life.
Yeah.
And what's really important is like the relationships and the people in your life and the experiences. Yeah. So I want my life to take place in a beautiful environment,
Yeah.
But if it all burned down tomorrow and nobody was hurt, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. No, that's a great analogy, that idea of a play. I'm going to use that with my kids, right? All this is just the set, and they stick to the script. Let's talk about color for you, because one, you're sitting on an amazing couch full of color, and your use of color is really unique, I think, and really special. How important is color to you and your work?
Very important. My work is kind of graphically based on 50s and 60s advertising art and illustration, but the colors I use are the kind of things they never would have used back then.
Right.
I've really pumped up the colors. And that's actually one of the things I learned at university studying art was color theory. And one of the things I actually use every day in my work. How you can put certain colors together to make them appear brighter, almost neon. I never use any sort of neon colors or neon paints in my work.
Really?
But if you put like a lime green next to an orange, it'll make that orange fluoresce as if, it could be a neon color.
How about perceptions versus reality? So as an artist, right, sometimes, and I've heard you say, as an artist, you work harder than you thought you even might have.
Yeah.
You're working harder, and I think there's, in your paintings, sometimes they seem romantic, but you said they're dark, and the socialite life versus what the reality is the next day after the party's over.
Yeah.
I think you've had some experiences in your life.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't even know what reality is now because
Yeah.
it's all filtered through your perception.
Yeah.
And in the past, I mean, I had a pretty firm worldview, a pretty established worldview. But in the past couple of years, things have happened that have made me question my worldview. Something. I mean, I remember even the lead up to this election. I was firmly convinced. I have faith in the American people. They're going to make the right decision. Not to get too political or anything, but the results of the election kind of shattered that worldview.
Yeah.
The wisdom of the crowds. Well, maybe the crowds aren't always that wise.
I was getting socked in the gut. For me, at least, it was. Has that influenced your art? With this last election.
I've gone out of my way not to specifically reference that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think subconsciously maybe.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of friends who are artists, and they were very overtly political in the art they were doing, and I chose not to. I chose, if it's addressed in my work, it's very subtly.
Mm-hmm. How has, going back even to the global travel and your missionary, work, and then realizing that kind of we're all connected, but how important is art, do you think, as a vehicle for connecting us as humans?
Well, I think if you're into art, it's important.
Yeah.
The majority of people on this planet are not into art, and it doesn't really affect them very much. It might be something to hang on their wall that's pretty. Weirdly, being totally immersed in art, most of the people I deal with are really into art too.
Mm-hmm.
But the majority of people on Earth, art has very little meaning to them. But for people who are into art, it's really important, especially something like street art. I've been down to Brazil and hung out with a lot of street artists, and they're exactly like the street artists I know in the U.S.
Yeah.
They kind of have the same drives and they're making art for the same reason. Some of them in Brazil, some of the street artists were super, super poor, but they had this drive to leave their mark on the world, by painting things, by doing large-scale pieces of art on the side of a building or on a freeway overpass.
Yeah. And has that been a joy, I'm sure, to meet artists all over the world and different artists of different types, right?
Yeah, it's always, especially meeting an artist whose work I've admired.
Yeah.
You know that artist just through his or her work. And then when you meet that person, you're like, wow, you're completely different than I thought you would be. You even look different than I pictured you looking.
Perception versus reality,
yeah.
right? Are there still artists out there that you hope to meet someday?
Yeah, I'm trying to think who I'd like to meet. Obviously the big ones like Banksy.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet Banksy. I have friends who've met him and even worked with him. Maybe I've met him. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he was the other artist in grade school, right? How about the allure of mid-century art and design? I think you talked, and just cocktail culture.
Well, the mid-century design for me was one of the things that drew me to it was the optimism. These designers, these architects, these furniture designers, even automobile designers, they felt like what they were designing was going to make the world better for people. We're turning the chair upside down, we're making a better chair. We're turning architecture upside down, we're making a better house for the future, And this was going to revolutionize the way people lived. It didn't turn out that way, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Most people rejected that and returned to traditional architecture and furniture styles. But I love the exuberant enthusiasm for the future, the optimism behind it, and I think that's why I put it in my art as well.
How do you compare that era to maybe today? Is it that easy to encapsulate everything in today?
No, because weirdly, even though people were a lot more willing to go out on sort of push the envelope design-wise in their own personal environments, socially it was a lot more restrictive back then. And now it's kind of turned around where people want, if they build a new house, all they can think is it's got to have a red tile roof, it's got to be stucco, a Tuscan villa or something.
Yeah.
But then socially, things are a lot more open and less repressive than they were back then.
Yeah. Okay. I read this about your art. Something that's happening, often sinister and usually a bit mysterious. And it made me think of this question. If you had to paint a portrait called Today, where would you start? What might it look like? What color would you start with?
It would be light blue at the top and gray at the bottom. It might be a hillside with a beautiful sort of mid-century modern house with a party going on. But then as you got down to the bottom of the hill, the world got more and more dystopic, more of like a bad science fiction movie down at the bottom.
Yeah.
Because, I see it, we're heading there now, as wealth accumulates at the very top, as the 1% get more and more wealth, and as the middle class sort of shrinks, and as more and more people fall out of that middle class into being poor, it's going to be the extremely wealthy and everyone else. And unless we do something about it, and I don't have those answers, and I don't think I'm the one who should be coming up with those answers.
We're not going to solve that in this interview. Huh?
And I think maybe that's just humanity returning to the way it always was, the last 100 years or 150 years with the Industrial Revolution, where we had a middle class, where people who actually own their own house and own their own car, that's an anomaly in human existence. It was always the king and the nobility, just a few people who had it all, and everyone else was peasants and serfs and sort of suffered under hard labor. Maybe that's the natural the natural way humans should be. I don't like it, but it seems like we're kind of returning to that,
Do you? Well, it's interesting because as I came into your house, your beautiful home with all this art, and the first painting I commented on was that oversized one. And what do you call it?
That's actually Earth.
Earth.
It's a triptych, and there's hell on one side and heaven on the other, and Earth.
And we discussed, kind of inspired by the Hieronymus Bosch painting, which I can't remember the name of that one.
Garden of Earthly Delights.
Garden of Earthly Delights. When did you paint Earth?
I painted that actually in 2007, after just returning from a visit to Spain, where I saw the original Garden of Earthly Delights paintings at the Prado Museum.
It's a beautiful piece, but I think it's relevant to the conversation we're having about this Today painting, this piece called Today. So maybe I can commission you to start it, and I'll pay you off in 20 years or something. So you mentioned these things in a conversation about your work, the American dream, the California dream, and celebrating life. And do you see yourself as an optimist, as an artist? Do you see yourself upbeat and relaying, trying to pep everybody up, or do you just sort of see yourself painting things as they are, or do you like that idea of celebration?
No, I'm an optimist. I paint things the way I hope they are, or hope they will be, or want them to be. Definitely, my outlook on life is optimistic, for better or worse sometimes. And, I don't want people, there are some paintings I've done where people might leave feeling depressed. But for the most part, I want people to be uplifted when they look at that painting, which is something you're not. There are a lot of things in art school that the direction of art was not going towards uplifting people. It was not going towards telling stories with your art or having a narrative. It was not going towards making beautiful pieces of art. It's in the last 20 years that's turned around a little bit, and there's a lot more of that.
Yeah, what's funny, I went to art school too, and that was the thing I remember was they didn't want, if you could paint a beautiful picture, there were great painters who left the program because they weren't appreciated. And actually they were a little scoffed, like, I don't want that. I can take a photo and make it look like that.
Yeah.
So I remember that time.
But fortunately, over the last 20 years, it's become a little more image-based, a little more narrative, and I like the way it's going. So
for you, this is a question I have about your work. It's it's so technical, and you came from a graphic arts background, and often it can seem computer generated, right? Do you do any computer generated work, or does it always?
I sometimes. Most of my art starts as an actual painting that I've done by hand, and then to turn it into like a serigraph, a silkscreen print edition, or to put it on products or whatever, it's got to be somehow turned into a computer file.
Yeah.
And I like to do that myself also because I'm really picky on the way things turn from a real life painting into a digital representation.
Do you have any thoughts on automation, technology, and futurism?
I'm pretty pro all of those things.
Okay.
You know, I know people are scared that automation is going to put people out of business, but it'll open up other businesses.
Yeah.
And I know artists now who only work digitally. You know, they create their image on the computer and then they have it output at, you know, some sort of print, and they never pick up a pencil or a pen or a paintbrush. It all happens in the box. First, when I saw that, I was like, is that real art? But over time, I've come to accept it as much as real art as any other medium. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a photograph, which I consider real art.
Sure.
You know, the guy's not painting it or drawing it. You
Right.
know, he's using technology to create that piece of art. And that's the same way with those artists who work completely digitally.
Yeah.
I think it's a legitimate art form.
Okay. So, Shag, with your retail stores, now the question, are those, so how long will it take to get rebuilt? When will the Palm Springs store be
The
back
new
open?
store is opening October 21st.
Okay.
So we've got about 3 weeks.
All right. And the existing store is on Melrose?
Yes.
Okay. And what do people find in those stores?
Well, prints, a lot of prints I've done. Some of them sold out editions, so rare prints. Others are prints that we've recently released. A lot of merchandise. And my policy on merchandise is either got to be useful or it's got to be art.
Okay.
So useful things like glassware, barware, throw pillows, I guess.
So I think in the theme of this project, in the UnitedNColor project, and the couch, and sort of the message that they're trying to relay to you, if you had to put something together and it had to create a message of peace from the Shag perspective, how would you frame a message of peace, and what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the big things is there are a lot of people out there whose business it is to divide us. Either it advances them politically or financially. But when it comes down to it, those divisions are really artificial in a lot of ways. I think most human beings are after the same sort of things in their life. And if we can sort of overlook those things that divide us and make us different, and focus on those things that are similar, I think it'll make the world a better place. And I think it's easy to buy into those divisions. You know, it's easy to say, you moron,
Yeah.
you think this way politically. How stupid are you? You know, but that moron has a lot more in common with you than he's got that's different.
Have we lost the ability to be rational, do you feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've gone through periods in my life where I just turn off the news.
Yeah.
You know, I don't watch the news for 6 months so that I don't know what's going on. And it's in some ways, it's more zen. You're a more peaceful person. You're not reading about every daily outrage or what's going wrong in the world, because that's what the news focuses on.
It's true. And I'd really try to do a good job of balancing out my sights and really trying to get an intelligent perspective, but I almost look at the news every day out of fear to find out what is going on, what do I need to be prepared for, and it would be much more zen to not look, but I'm addicted to it, to be honest with you. So it's been amazing, though. It's been a great opportunity.
Thank you, Derek.
So thank you very much. And it's been
Derek Delicious.
Yeah, Derek, my new nickname, Derek Delicious, but I'm Derek Sabori, and it's been an honor for me to sit with Shag and talk about peace, love, color, and art, and the power that art has. So thank you for the great creativity that you bring to the world.
To me, something that's neither useful nor art is a snow globe. So you will not find a Shag snow globe.
Well, to me, that's a challenge to you, to make a snow globe art or useful. And that's a wrap.
Yeah, that's it.